author of a new book. It is out this week. It is titled Supercommunicators, How to Unlock the Secret Language of Connection. Charles Duhigg is a Pulitzer Prize-winning journalist and author of several books, including The Power of Habit, which I've used to try to keep my habits going, though I'm not always as good as I should be. But
I'd like you to probably stop some of the habits I've seen that you.
Do you
have a book about how you can do that?
Well,
he's got quite a few.
You know what Charles has, though? This book, which is fascinating and really actually teaches you, Joe, how to communicate, how people can learn from each other, how to make people feel
Do I have to listen to them?
I'm going to give you a copy of this book after
I
this
have a
segment
copy
is
at
over.
home. I thought about it for my son. I mean, I think, yes.
Yeah, I think for young people, this is critical, right? Being able to communicate is a leader's job. That's what you do as a CEO.
But you have found these little, dare I say, I don't want to say tricks, but things that you can practically do to communicate more effectively. What would you say is the single biggest one?
The single biggest thing that you can do, and you're right, super communication is just a set of skills that anyone can learn. Any of us can become a super communicator. But the single biggest thing is to ask more questions. And in particular, to ask a special kind of question known as a deep question. If I bump into you and you say, oh, I'm a journalist, I could say, oh, how'd you decide to become a journalist? Like, what's your favorite part of your job? Now I'm asking you to talk about something real about yourself. And that's when we start to connect with each other.
But a lot of it, I also think, reading your book, is not just, we ask questions professionally. All three of us, actually.
Yeah, but I know the answers to
You know the answers.
And most of the questions I'm asking, I already know.
I don't. But it's actually about listening.
Absolutely.
No. So talk about that, because it's not just listening yourself. It's actually showing the other person that you're listening.
That's exactly right.
Pretending.
When we're having really hard conversations, there's always, or really any kind of big conversation, there's something in the back of our head, a product of evolution, that says, is this person actually listening to me, or are they waiting their turn to speak?
Right.
And so if we prove that we're listening, and there's a technique known as looping for understanding that they teach at Harvard and Stanford.
Okay, yeah. Let me ask you. No, I'm kidding.
Looping for understanding.
You ask a question, you repeat back what you heard in your own words, and then you ask them if you got it right. And what studies have shown is that when you do this, it transforms conversations, because that other person believes you're listening to them, you've proved it, and that makes them want to listen to you in return.
Okay, what about challenging, confrontational conversations?
Yeah, those are tough, right? And in the book we tell the story of Netflix, where there was an internal civil war over race. And it would have been very normal for the company to say, look, this doesn't belong at the office. Leave politics at home. But instead they said the opposite. They said, look, let's acknowledge our differences, but let's also acknowledge all of our similarities, that we're all people who are members of our community. We care about this company. And it's only by bringing everyone to the table and giving them a voice and showing that we listen to each other that you resolve issues like that. And so that's exactly right. In conflicts, we have to do the same thing.
Okay, here's a harder one. So we're doing this face-to-face.
Yeah.
But the whole world has moved to this.
Yes.
And it's not just FaceTime. It's on text. It's on Slack. It's on email. And so often, it feels to me like people read things into your messages, right?
Absolutely. Absolutely. And this happens all the time. And it's oftentimes when we make a mistake, and it's because we forget that different forms of communication have different rules. So when telephones first became popular, there was this theory that nobody would be able to have real conversations on them because they couldn't see each other. But of course, you and I, by the time we were teenagers, we had conversations for 7 hours a night. Right. And our kids, I'm sure this is true of your kids, when they're on the phones, they understand that a text is different from an emoji, is different from an email, is different from a phone call. But those of us who are a little bit older, sometimes we forget that there's differences, and we just have to remind ourselves of those rules.
But what are the rules? I mean, no, because also people try to read in, I wouldn't say the best of intentions, they often read in the worst of intentions.
I think that's right. Or you might say something sarcastic and you can hear the sarcasm in your head, but they don't see it when they get the email. And I think the key there is to overemphasize. So there was a bunch of studies done looking at particular online discussions, and they found that if just one person started saying please and thank you, the entire conversation got better, no matter how big it was. And so a rule for being online, for a tough, is you say please and thank you. You overemphasize the politeness, you underemphasize the sarcasm.
Did you catch that, Joe? Politeness.
Yeah, I did.
Politeness.
Unfortunately, when I'm sarcastic, it doesn't even have to be electronically. People still don't get it half the time.
Yeah. Well, so I have a question for you, because my guess is what's happening there, take laughter. 80% of the time when people laugh in a conversation, it's not in response to anything funny. It's because they're showing that they want to connect with you.
So you're asking me.
So my question...
No, I'm giving it back to you like you told me to do.
Right, you're doing a great job.
Was that good? How about this? I understand how you feel. Many of my clients have felt that way in the past, but they have found that... How's that sound?
Yeah, very
I got
good.
a lot of canned.
I'd keep my cash with you.
What was 10,000 a good start, or would,
Absolutely.
Would 20,000 be better for you?
Do you take a check? Can I write it right now?
You know, I did think about how to win friends and influence people as one of the if you've read that.
Of course.
And communicating, but a lot of it, I'll tell you what, I don't want to lessen what you're doing, but it kind of seems like sometimes you're steering people where you want them to go for your own purposes.
Well, so what's happened in the last 10 years is we're living through this golden age of understanding communication because of advances in neural imaging and data collection. We understand how communication happens in a way that back during that time of win friends and influence people, they didn't understand.
Yeah.
And one of the things that we've learned is that their authenticity is incredibly important. That if I try and manipulate you in a conversation, maybe it'll work for a couple of minutes, but you're going to see through it, right? And so what we need to engage in is this reciprocal authenticity, that when I say something real to you, something honest, your instinct is to say something honest back. And without that, we probably won't connect with you.
Who's the best communicator you know?
I mean, the best communicator I know is a guy named Greg Nelson and Don and Steele. Let me ask you this, and they're friends of mine. When you've had a bad day and you want to call someone who you know will make you feel better, does that person pop into your mind? Do you know who you would call?
Yeah.
Yeah, probably most of the people watching do too. That person for you is a super communicator, and you're probably a super communicator back to them. But some people can do this consistently. Some people can connect with almost anyone.
Can I ask, do you think that's an authentic thing? The people who you say are the true super communicators, is it something, is it this talent, this skill? Is it because when I started even introducing you, I said, there are these tricks. Because I read the book and I'm like, okay, there are these little, I'm going to try some of these tricks on you. But, but to call them tricks are maybe unfair.
I think it is. I think it's like saying that, recognizing the alphabet is a trick to learn to read.
Right.
You actually know how to read, right? And when you do these skills, when you just practice this, our brains are designed to make them into habits, and they become real. Because when I prove to you that I'm listening, it doesn't mean that I'm not listening. I actually have to listen to you to prove to you that I got what you said.
I also think, just one other thing, I'm not going to sell the book for Charles, but I'm going to say this. I don't know if you ever have, you don't have this, but if you ever have an insecurity about going up to somebody and talking to somebody, I actually thought that there were lessons in this book about that would actually make you feel better and more secure in actually approaching other people.
Absolutely. There was a great study done by Harvard Business School where they told students they were going to have conversations with strangers, which is really anxiety producing. And they told them, take 5 seconds and write down 3 topics you're going to talk about. Simple stuff like last night's movie and this weekend's game. And they found that people stuck those topics in their pocket and they never came up. But they reported being so much less anxious and the conversations being so much better simply because they had prepared for a little bit and they had something to fall back on.
Just to fall back on, yeah. Get that.
Is there any way to deliver bad news better?
Absolutely. Absolutely. The first thing that you can do is you can tell someone, I'm going to give you bad news. And I want you to know we can have a conversation about it, or you don't have to have a conversation. You can just take this and you can carry it with you and come back some other time.
I got the good news and the bad news is a good way to do it sometimes.
And which one do you want first?
That's a question. That always depends. It depends.
If you're laying someone off saying, look, I have good news about the company, and the bad news is you're fired, I don't think they're going to listen to the good news.
That might not work.
Charles Duhigg, thank you. The book is called Supercommunicators, and it is fascinating. I learned a lot of lessons, and as I said, Joe, I'm going to be trying out some of this stuff on you.
You do that. You do that. That'll work.
Thank you.
We're coming right back. Thank you, Charles.